Over the years, but especially recent, I've noticed a lot of DBD players, more so content creators, taking a step back from the game in multiple ways. This means less streaming of the game, less community interaction, or cutting back other portions of content creation. Of course, this can happen naturally over time due to burnout, but as somebody that observes a lot of the feedback given, I think there are more than a few issues that exacerbate it. But what exactly can behavior do to help this? Let's find out. I also want to clarify this goes a lot deeper than just, fix tunneling and camping or gin rushing. These are more overarching issues. Skill-based matchmaking was added to DBD September 2021. The skill-based matchmaking system currently hides the rank, now called the grade, of the player and instead showcases the prestige level, which is basically the amount of blood points put into a character. The system uses a hidden number to score and determine a player's matchmaking rank, or MMR. However, the system outlines that getting kills or escaping counts as a win, thus contributing to the MMR score, but you'll never know the actual MMR score of your character. But since it's been implemented, I've noticed that it's caused both sides to go for more efficiency over other aspects of the game. Why? Well, the win conditions are clearly outlined as solely kills and escapes, not much else, therefore causing people to sweat for an invisible number, thus creating a nasty cycle of efficiency between killers and survivors. The previous ranking system for DBD was the emblem system. The emblem system was mainly focused on pipping. You'd get pips and your survivor/killer rank would increase based on that. It was rank 20 through rank 1, and it was grouped by colors like so, and it was a lot less restrictive. You got pips for having well-rounded games that included a little bit of everything, which was generally possible to do. For survivor, the standard was 2 gens, 2 unhooks, 2 totems. I'm also not saying that the emblem system was perfect, because it definitely wasn't. There could be games where you de-pipped or only safety pipped due to things that were out of your control. I just feel like it was a better fit for DBD because there was still wiggle room to pip while also playing a variety of styles since the main incentive was solely pipping. Nowadays, I notice a lot of my matches don't stand out as often as they used to, and a lot of my games can turn sweaty really fast. On the survivor side, killers will prioritize kills due to the nature of MMR, resulting in less interactive gameplay like camping, tunneling, or protecting gens a lot. On the other side, for killers, survivors will play efficiently by immersing at times, splitting on gens, pre-dropping every pallet. Either way, for both sides, it doesn't really feel like survivors have a real incentive to be good at looping as a whole. Just gens. It seems like the overarching theme for the entire gameplay is just gens, really. And as survivor, it can be detrimental to not have long chases, and as killer, it can feel a little too easy or boring at times. Regardless, the cycle that goes is that killers and survivors will play efficiently to combat each other due to skill-based matchmaking, and it's a vicious one at that. It doesn't always have to be that way though. As for myself, I spice up the majority of my games by going for saboteur and breakout, flashlight saves, head-ons, or chase builds instead of 90-second gens. I will say though, because these gameplay styles are a lot more aggressive, people do take it to heart even if it's more skillful since it's outside of the normal gameplay loop. I notice I get a lot more tunneling, camping, nodding, hit on hook, being blood out, or even in-game chat hate, but I stay prepared for it and I think you should too if you decide to go this route. 6.1 was a patch that dropped July 2022 that was considered to be a long-awaited overhaul for Killer to make Killer feel more powerful. But when it was introduced, the kill rates and escape rates were already pretty equal, and given how much depth the DBD had at that point, it kind of made sense that some of the top players and the average players on both sides balanced out to about half and half. But 6.1 majorly changed that. Gen times were increased to 90 seconds base, killers could kick gens and remove 2.5% progress base, bloodlust trigger tiers were buffed to 15, 25, and 35 seconds respectively, killers kicked walls, pallets, and gens 10% faster, killers recovered from hitting survivors 10% faster, and survivors had their movement speed after being hit reduced by 10% as well. Now, these changes may seem like small enough increments, but during the initial PTB, I started to notice just how drastically some of my games actually were changing. Not just for me, but my audience, my peers, and other popular content creators. More concerning, however, was that despite these buffs becoming base for all killers, including those considered to be S tier at the time like Spirit, Nurse, and Blight, which hey, they kinda still are, none of the killer perks were changed to be in line with those updates, such as Brutal Strength and Save the Best for Last, with the latter being the worst. The changes made the perk even stronger, as the 10% essentially gave 2 stacks base kit, giving 10 stacks total in reality. There were also a slew of perk changes that many people didn't seem to enjoy, on either side. Removing the blood point incentive from both We're Gonna Live Forever and Barbecue stripped an extra way to earn blood points, but also took away the incentive of being altruistic and going for multiple hooks, respectively. There were other perks such as Iron Will, Hex Ruin, Pop Goes the Weasel, and Calm Spirit that were nerfed or given odd downsides to using such simple perks. But after the dust settled, September 15th, 2022, Behavior released some additional stats. And it turns out that after this major update, it boosted the kill rate to 61% and it dropped escape rates to 39%, which, as you can see right here in this chart, is a pretty steep difference, but also largely unnecessary in my opinion. I think some of the changes were needed, but in hindsight, this many changes all at once was a little too much. The longer the game has been out, the more changes in terms of balance have been added, making gameplay a lot more linear. And with the game becoming more linear, a lot of skill expression or even fun mechanics have just been removed from DBD as a whole. I can understand they did it from simplicity's sake, especially for newer players, but I don't necessarily think that the game was very easy to digest with the steady pipeline of content every 3 months in the first place. And I think it will only ever continue to grow as long as they stay on schedule, but I'm quite certain they won't be changing that anytime soon. Regardless, there have always been many ways to express skill in DBD, such as the old tractor loop, which has kind of been reduced to this. But also Sky Billy or Space Billy. Lightburn for interesting gameplay changes on killers like Wraith, Nurse, Spirit, and Hag. The ability to unhook yourself at the end of matches, flashlight clicking to adjust timing, flashlight angles, and so much more. I've only recently started streaming more on TikTok, but it's made me realize just how many new players actually are coming into DBD. But one of the frequent concerns that I see is that there's a little too much to grind for. I play the game as a full-time content creator, so I have all the time in the world, but for people with regular jobs or other commitments like kids, I can see how it can be overwhelming. Every 3 months, new content is released, and the standard is usually a killer, survivor, and a map. Although I will acknowledge we've been having a lot more paragraph chapters, which is a lot less stressful. The concept of content coming out every 3 months, though, is awesome, but I do think that it can be hurtful for newer players in the sense of the overwhelming knowledge, but even then, I also think about some of the pricing as well, especially if the DLC is licensed. But also especially if they have pay-to-win perks that can take a while to come to the Shrine of Secrets. And of course, when I say pay-to-win perks, I'm talking about a lot of the very popular meta perks. When you think of really strong perks like Ultimate Weapon or Save the Best for Last, both of them come from DLC characters. Even on the Survivor side, if you're thinking really strong perks, if you're thinking Decisive Strike, or even Reassurance, both of those come from DLC characters. But even outside of pricing, new content like Survivors or perks isn't too bad since Survivors function as skins and perks can easily be reworked. However, killers introduce a completely new gameplay loop to master, but also to play against. And given some of the feedback on more of the recent killer editions, I feel concerned in this area as well. I've taken note of how much negative feedback was given for certain chapters, and it boiled down to the killer essentially. I have seen a lot of disdain for Sadako, Knight, and Skull Merchant specifically. There are reasons why, of course, but I think that's best saved for another video. Either way, I genuinely think extra time may be necessary for some content because once killers are released, it can, and I definitely know it will take a while for good reworks to come about. All 3 that I've mentioned have received tweaks since their releases, but Sadako and Skull Merchant specifically have at least received 1 rework that's changed their gameplay. And Sadako is currently on her 3rd rework. That's the most out of any killer in the game so far. Once upon a time, DBD devs used to have frequent chats with the community and give updates on upcoming projects, fixes, tweaks, and even Q&As with amazing transparency. However, as the years have gone on, communication has dwindled quite a bit, as many people have noticed. I think some of this is normal due to the sheer size of behavior now, but at the same time, many players are often left in the dark. I've noticed that despite some of the more recent Q&As being advertised with, transparency, a lot of the answers are pretty vague at best, leading to disappointment for those dedicated players. A lot of the answers don't give solid ones, such as a yes or no, but instead a maybe. The team hasn't thought of it yet, or it's in the works, but we can't show the full product, or it's not conceptualized enough to tease either. Throughout DBD's existence, many players have come and gone, but the many that do stick around, such as veterans and content creators, are the ones that do know this game best. Do I agree with every opinion from my peers? Absolutely not. Yet many of them come up with some of the greatest solutions to the biggest problems of DBD. But to piggyback off of Otts, it doesn't matter how simple or brilliant the solution may be. Even if the whole community agrees on it, behavior is probably still going to do what they want in the end. It doesn't feel good because many of us have dedicated that time that spanned literal years for some of us, but it's very underutilized and undeniably hurtful. I really wish we had more opportunities to have community feedback actually in place for the game. If you didn't know this already, DBD actually has a mobile version that is completely different from the core game on PC and other platforms. Mobile DBD is owned by NetEase, a Chinese company, and they have a completely different developer team. They've had more quality of life for a longer time, such as the ability to see your teammates' perks in the lobby and the visual heartbeat for those hard of hearing or deaf. They also have universal cosmetics for survivors, ensuring that everybody can get a decent amount of love. They also have separate game modes like Prop Hunt, and they have the beloved nostalgia of older maps, textures, and animations. But that's something a little extra. Now, some of the features and cosmetics from mobile have been transferred over to the core game, but it's taken a long time for those to happen. But we also don't know what's coming next, or if we are actually getting anything else from mobile anytime soon, sadly. But we do know that we've been denied some additional gestures added to core, such as this, out of the fear that it'll break immersion. That and the idea of separate game modes has come to core, but the release teaser for the limited time Lights Out mode has panned out to be more like Dredge's Nightfall. But I do think that the majority of us were expecting something a little different. Lastly, these are some miscellaneous changes that I think would improve DBD tenfold. They're really small too. The reorganization of the game HUD. Years after the change, I'm very happy that they listened to some of the feedback, but a customizable HUD would feel so much better. I'd like the ability to move maybe my scoring events up here or down here, that kind of thing. The ability to adjust individual elements of the HUD. In the recent update, the text has been so large, but it's to the point that it overlaps and can be quite distracting. But if you adjust the sizing of the HUD, everything else scales too, and I feel like it shouldn't. Separate adjustments would be fantastic. Hide the prestige until endgame. Somehow, people are still scared of P100s or just high prestiges in general. And in my experience, if I don't last second swap to my P100 Claudette, I can expect a sweaty match a lot of the time, on top of what I already get. But even if I do last second swap to her, people still consider it to be toxic. If prestiges were hidden, I wouldn't have to worry about this nearly as much. Opt out of experiments. Some gameplay mechanics were changed for accessibility purposes, such as the wiggle or struggle mechanic, but it would be nice to opt out of these and have the original. Some of us also have perks showing on the top right side as an experiment, but it can only be opted out if you're on anon mode, when I feel like it should be toggleable. Lastly, a blood web button for no prestige and a spend all blood point button would be fantastic. Spending time to manually get to prestige 1 just to have the spending button is time consuming, especially as a content creator. But I feel like we also need to spend all because blood points can stack up rather quickly. But give us those and I'd be super happy. And that's all that I have for the video. Let me know what you guys think down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.